Welcome back, you guys, and with the official news dropping of Anthony Davis requesting a trade from the New Orleans Pelicans, it's probably the best time to talk about how we got to this point. Why did AD request a trade? Well, it's been almost 7 years since New Orleans drafted AD, and they have had a worse cumulative record than the Charlotte Hornets since then. The poor trades, the poor signings in free agency, and the poorly timed injuries. We're going to go through all of that and how it led to the trade request on the morning of January 28th. Davis said that he still wants to play this year out with the Pelicans, so if you want to see AD in a Pelicans jersey for one last time, the best way to do that is through the SeatGeek app, who I want to thank for sponsoring this video. Instead of having to search everywhere on the web for the best ticket prices, SeatGeek does all the work for you by putting every single ticket from that event into one spot for you to pick from. They then give those tickets a grade out of 100, so if it's green, then you know it's a good deal. If it's red, then you know it's a bad deal. If you're still not sure about the seat you picked, they have a feature that lets you see what you're getting before you buy. Remember, by supporting SeatGeek, you're also supporting me, so if you're thinking about going to a concert or a sporting event in the future, you can get $20 off your first ticket purchase by using my promo code CAINE when you check out. So why does Anthony Davis want out? Well, it's primarily because New Orleans hasn't won enough and hasn't put together the best collection of talent over the 7 years they've had Davis. To understand why they were never able to win enough, it starts at the top, and that's ownership and the front office. It's why certain teams across every sport have stayed bad for years. Their ownership and front office is either incompetent or not on the same page. With the Pelicans, it might be a combination of both, but it's a unique situation here. A lot of blame goes to Dell Demps, who is the GM of the Pelicans, and he definitely deserves some blame. The easy thing to say though is Dell Demps stinks, but it's more complicated. The Pelicans actually have two people who are higher in the basketball operations pecking order than Dell Demps. They have some football people running the team. Dennis Lauscha, who is not only the president of the Pelicans, but the president of the New Orleans Saints. The second person is Mickey Loomis, who is not only the head of basketball operations for the Pelicans, he is the GM of the New Orleans Saints. The problem with the Pelicans is that their owner and top-level management know almost nothing about basketball, and they have another job that is of a higher priority to them. I can't think of another team in the NBA where the top two people in the basketball operations department have another professional sports job. New Orleans is a football city, no doubt about it, but you're taking it to a whole nother level by hiring basketball operations people that care about the football team more, and then you hand over the keys to a below average to average general manager who has made poor roster decisions. The management is just not in sync. The Pelicans put out a statement about the Anthony Davis trade request, and they said that they still look to build a championship team there in New Orleans. Well, I will tell you this, for that to happen, they will have to do something that is just as vital as the AD trade, and that's hiring a president of basketball operations and vice president that's only job is the Pelicans. Then you can go on to choose a new GM and new head coach. Make sure you're all on the same page. That right there is just as important as getting a good haul for AD. The NBA teams that have done well year after year are the teams who have built a strong base from the top of the organization to the bottom. Seeing that the Pelicans have two high-level executives with another job more important to them, you can see why the Pelicans have reached the point where Anthony Davis requested a trade a year and a half before he hits free agency. So moving on to the transactions, let's go back to 2012 when AD was drafted. That year that they drafted AD was also the summer they got Ryan Anderson and re-signed Eric Gordon to a 4-year, $58 million deal. Eric Gordon at the time really wanted to go to the Suns, and honestly this move was what was the beginning of the end, which I'll get into when we speak on Omer Asik, so stick around for that. In the perfect timeline, the Pelicans would have let Eric Gordon go to the Suns and kept their flexibility, which would have prevented them from making desperate trades and losing first-round picks in the future. During Gordon's first 3 seasons in New Orleans, he missed 115 games due to injuries, and they lost him for nothing in free agency in 2016 to the Houston Rockets when there was a market to trade for him. The next year in 2013, they dealt the 6th pick and their 2014 first-round pick for Drew Holiday. Holiday eventually signed a 5-year, $115 million contract in 2017, and if you remember at the time, that contract was looking awful. Holiday was playing below his standards and dealing with injuries, but a year and a half later, he's a borderline all-star and would be an all-star in the East, so that was a good move by the Pelicans. In that 2013 summer, they also were involved in a 3-team trade where they gave up Robin Lopez and Grievous Vasquez and got back Tyreke Evans, who was a big part of their playoff run in 2015. But he only played in 25 games in the next season because of a knee injury and was eventually traded. Plus, he wasn't the greatest fit on the team because he was a ball stopper and he regressed from his rookie year. Okay, so let's move on to a signing that really hurt the Pelicans. Because Anthony Davis in 2014 wasn't really down with playing center full time, they brought in Omer Asik from the Rockets in a trade where they gave up their first round pick. In theory, Asik and Davis were going to be this great defensive duo. They also re-signed Alexei Ajinça, a backup 7-footer, to a 4-year, $20 million deal. Both of those moves ended up being awful for the roster and their cap sheet. Omer was one of the best defensive bigs back on that 2011 Bulls team, but a few seasons later, the combination of him having zero offensive game and a bacterial infection shortened his NBA career. The Pelicans signed Asik to a 5-year, $58 million deal in 2015, and in the last 2 years on the team he played a combined 45 games. So remember how I was talking about how matching the Suns' offer of Eric Gordon in 2012 was the beginning of the disaster? Well, having Eric Gordon on their cap sheet forced them to sign and trade for Tyreke Evans instead of just outright signing for him in free agency. Trading for Tyreke made them lose Robin Lopez, which led to Dell Demps trading a first-round pick for Omer Asik in the next season, and we just talked about how Omer was a disaster cap-wise. Not matching the Suns' offer would have given them way more flexibility, and they had to pay for that mistake for years trying to get a center next to Anthony Davis. In the summer of 2016, they signed E'Twaun Moore to a 4-year, $34 million contract. Moore is in a pretty big slump right now, but he's been a nice piece for them, so that was a good signing. But this is the Pelicans we're talking about. They also signed Solomon Hill to a 4-year, $48 million contract. He pretty much got that contract off of one good playoff series for the Pacers. Hill was supposed to be that 6'7" small forward the Pelicans never had, but he's turned out to be a pretty bad contract. They can't trade him because he has no value as a shooter or defender, plus he's taking up a decent amount of their cap, so this signing was an L. Solomon this season is shooting 30% from 3 and averaging 4 points per game. I mentioned it earlier, but they also lost Ryan Anderson and Eric Gordon in this 2016 summer for nothing when there was a trade market for both of them. At the 2017 trade deadline, you guys remember that they traded away Buddy Hield, Tyreke Evans in their first round pick for DeMarcus Cousins, and one of their last ditch moves to pair a star with AD. AD and DeMarcus started off kind of slow as a duo. They didn't make the playoffs, and there were some questions. Will this even work? Will two bigs work in this era? But in the next season with Drew and Rondo at top form, the Pelicans were putting on a win streak in the middle of January 2018 that put them firmly in the playoff race. But then their luck ran out. Less than a minute before they beat the Rockets, who were running through the league at the time, Boogie injures his Achilles and is out for the rest of the year. You can probably say that the DeMarcus injury is what really ended the era in New Orleans for AD. And because of that injury, the Pelicans had to go out and make a trade at the 2018 deadline where they gave up another first-round pick and they got back Nikola Mirotic, a 6'10" floor-spacing forward that fits well next to Davis. Mirotic is a good player, but he's not somebody that matters if you're trying to convince him to stay in 2020. They did smoke teams with AD at center and Mirotic at power forward, but it was just too late at that point. So to recap all of that, the Pelicans traded away a first-round pick every single year since 2013 to build this team around Anthony Davis, and all they have to show for it is one playoff series win against the Portland Trail Blazers. So moving on to the current roster, the funny thing about it is that it's not that bad. Drew Holiday, E'Twaun Moore, Nikola Mirotic, Julius Randle, those are a nice group of players to play with. But because of injuries, lack of respectable bench players, and roster construction, the team has a ceiling. Julius Randle is good, but within the context of an Anthony Davis-led offense, Julius is not useful in crunch time because he can't space the floor, which is why Mirotic is a better fit next to him. That's kind of bad when you have one of your best players on the bench and they have to throw out one of their not good small forwards to space the floor. That's a Pelicans problem for years. They never had a 6'7", 6'8" average small forward. Last year in the playoffs, you had Drew Holiday, who is 6'4", defending KD at times because they had no small forwards worth playing. It's one thing to have a weak bench, but it's another to throw out multiple players I'd consider G League level players, or someone that is not reliable enough to be an 8th or 9th man on what is considered a playoff team. When Mirotic and Elfrid Payton were out with injuries, I watched AD and Drew Holiday share the court with Solomon Hill, Darius Miller, and Frank Jackson late in the fourth quarter of a close game. Those should be 11th and 12th men, but here they are playing crunch time minutes. If Elfrid Payton being injured hurts the rotation of your team this much, then there is a larger problem here. So yeah, no one is really surprised by this trade request. We knew it was coming. I mean, no one on the Pelicans roster is that surprised and probably understand why he's asking for a trade. A combination of terribly timed injuries, bad contracts, trading away first round picks, and not trading players when they had value contributed to AD wanting to leave. They made some good trades and signings between 2017 and 2018, but it was the seasons where AD was still on his rookie contract where the Pelicans really messed up by overpaying people and trading first round picks. It should be an interesting next 10 days or so with the Lakers needing to make this trade for him now. This one went kind of long, but I hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you guys soon.